and a warm welcome to our audience from Vienna for this event, which is actually the third edition of a series we have started already last year. When I say we are talking about the Austro-French Centre for Rapprochement in Europe with our partner Institute Montaigne in Paris and also partner institutions in the four Visegrad countries, because we are talking about the Central European perspectives for the future of the European Union in an Austrian-French dialogue. And we had the first edition on Slovakia in December. Last month, we had an interesting discussion concerning the Czech Republic. And I'm very happy that today we can continue with a focus on Hungary, but it's obviously not just about Hungary. We are talking about a dialogue between Hungary, France, and Austria. The rationale behind that was that we felt that in a situation where Europe has gone through multiple crises, from the economic and financial crisis, the migration crisis, and finally, after Brexit, the pandemic, it's time to address the question of the future of Europe in a way which brings in different perspectives and also different points of views. And we also felt that maybe the situation of the Visegrad countries and their individual member countries is not always as well understood in all parts of the European Union as it might be in Vienna, where obviously we are much closer to the V4 and where obviously we are also in a country which cooperates in different formats with those countries. Now, today it's my great pleasure to welcome a very eminent panel for this discussion. I'm very grateful to Minister Edstadler for being able to be with us. Federal Minister Edstadler is Minister for European Affairs and Constitutional Affairs. She was before that a member of the European Parliament. Before that, she served as State Secretary for European Affairs, and she has a very distinguished professional career also in legal affairs. She's a former judge, a prosecutor. She worked for the Ministry of Justice in Vienna, but she was also, I think in 2016 and 17 at the European Court for Human Rights in Strasbourg. So once again, thank you very much for being with us. The same applies to State Secretary Oskar Ökres in Budapest. He is relatively new in his function. I think you started in January this year to be the State Secretary for European Affairs in the Ministry of Justice. But obviously you are not a newcomer. You have served as deputy before that. You held different posts in the administration on European coordination, and you also spent quite a number of years in the European Parliament, where you worked as a councillor for the Fidesz party. And finally, last but not least, a very warm welcome also to Monsieur Bernard Guetta, who is a member of the European Parliament for Renew Europe. Mr. Guetta has a long and distinguished career as a French journalist. He worked in different functions for very prestigious media such as Le Monde, L'Express, Europe Inter, and he also was in different stages, I think, a correspondent in parts of Central Europe. He was in Vienna, he was in Poland, but he also served in Moscow and in Washington. And of course, he should also be mentioned as an author of a great number of books, which I don't have the time to mention all, but he also published on Central Europe, including on Hungary. So with that, I would like to start our discussion. And if I may, I would suggest maybe that we have two rounds before we then go into the period where we take some questions from the audience. I suggest to have first a round which is dealing more with the general issues of how the three countries see the future of the European Union. what their expectations are also of the conference on the future of the European Union. But I would be grateful if you could also focus a bit in your expectations and how you see also the institutional balance in the future between the institutions, member states. This obviously involves issues like, do we need more or less federalism? Is there room for Europe of different speeds? I think these would be interesting questions, as well as how the three countries see the role of Europe in the world. Strategic autonomy is an issue which has been more prominent in recent terms. And then in the second round, I suggest to focus more on some actual issues, which I think all of our audience would expect us to discuss when we talk with Hungary. I think many of them will have read the newspapers today, which focus on the fact that the Fidesz members of the European Parliament have left the European People's Party. And of course, we had this big discussion on the rule of law in connection with the European Recovery Fund and the budget. So those, including on issues like solidarity and values, I would suggest to leave maybe to a second round. I would like to start with you, State Secretary Ökres, on the first round. As I said, we read a lot about Hungary, but I don't think we read that much about the question on how Hungary actually sees its role in the European Union. What are its expectations of how the European Union should develop, how it sees its position in the context of the Visegrad countries, and what more concretely do you expect as an outcome from the conference on Europe once it gets underway? Mr. State Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the possibility to share my thoughts with you and for the invitation. The initiative is highly welcome, and it's a real honor to be here with you today at this event organized by our Austrian neighbors, our in-laws, as we say in Hungary, especially on a personal note that our Austrian sisters and brothers can properly pronounce my name with the two umlauts in it. So the letter Ö is not unknown for you. This is a good basis for a relationship. And of course, reflecting on the future of the EU is always welcome, especially for those who work with the functioning and operation of the European Union on a professional basis. And if you allow me, I would just like to say a few words about the most pressing issues, maybe reflect on the Hungarian approach regarding them, and I will also, if the time allows, address on how we see the way forward. Of course, as it may come as no surprise, the utmost priority for Hungary, and we believe for the EU, and for that matter, the whole world, is to come over the COVID-19 pandemic and the dire economic consequences caused by the virus, and to simultaneously effectively tackle the spread of the virus. The third wave that is sieging our countries right now, and of course, as part of that, and as a number one priority, to vaccinate as many people as possible and as soon as possible. And of course, after the pandemic situation has been properly dealt with, hopefully to the best interest of our citizens, then we must draw the appropriate conclusions on how the member states and the EU have managed to tackle the crisis. So far, for Hungary, one of the main conclusions on how this pandemic has been dealt with is that a strong EU, and on the other hand, a strong alliance of strong member states is necessary to deal with such a situation. We highly welcome that the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences has been and is continuously being dealt with at the highest level. The heads of state and government have discussed specifically the issue of the pandemic and the economic reconstruction, as well as, of course, the healthcare consequences about a dozen times, giving the EU institutions and member states guidance and exchanging best practices. And also the Commission's work in coordinating national efforts is indeed valuable. And of course, the role of strong and ready to act member states is also, I believe, unquestionable. Well, once the economic recovery and the restoration of the health of European citizens is achieved, which we truly hope to be as soon as possible, reflection on the future of the European cooperation is necessary. And to this end, we highly welcome the initiative to give an institutional framework on how to discuss and to conduct a debate on the future of Europe. And it's also recent news that the European Parliament has given the green lamp for the joint declaration of the three institutions to start the conference, which in our view is high time, because as we sometimes jokingly, when this initiative has been first mentioned, said that one of the main questions was whether we should focus on institutional issues, which is of course very interesting for us, for those who do this for a living, dealing with the EU institution, or we should rather focus on or give priority to policy issues. And our answer was that out of the two, we believe we should rather focus on the very specific policy initiatives that our citizens are most interested in and that influence their lives on a daily basis, rather than a navel-gazing exercise of the EU. However, there is one thing that may be even worse than focusing on EU institutional and organizational issues, is focusing on the organization by which we should debate on the organization of the EU. And in the past 1.5 years, unfortunately, it has been the case. So, of course, the whole project has been hindered by the pandemic as well. So finally, we are very happy that the debate will actually be a debate, and the conference will start as such. And to this end, if you let me emphasize a few key dimensions that characterizes the Hungarian approach towards the future of the EU. One of the main experiences of the past years, I believe, is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to either the variety and diversity of the challenges that the member states and the EU faces, as well as there is a huge and most welcome diversity among the approaches of the member states towards these challenges. And it's clear that and it's true in several policy fields and different areas of national and EU action that member states have developed national models to reflect their own societal, economic, and foreign policy situations, for that matter. And maybe this is the core position of Hungary when it comes to EU integration, that such successful models that best fit the national characteristics and national situation must be respected and supported by the EU in line with the EU motto, United in Diversity. And also, if you let me, maybe not quite precisely, but quote Robert Schuman, who once said that the whole objective of European integration is not to subdue national efforts, but to open an even wider space for them. And this cannot be said any more eloquently. This, as I said, is one of the key features of the Hungarian EU position. Whereas any effort, in our view, that aims or unintentionally results in curbing national efforts and a national contribution to a diverse EU landscape results in a weaker union as such. However, there are, of course, lots of policy fields and specific dossiers, and once again, if you let me refer to those working professionally with the EU, know that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of dossiers and initiatives where there is a true convergence and alignment of national interests among the EU 27, and in these policy fields, these are the policy fields where we should truly facilitate moving forward, and which may primarily contribute to the goal of economic recovery and growth. One of these, or actually two of these primary policy fields would be the so-called twin transition, as it is referred to nowadays, meaning, of course, the green transition and sustainability development, and digitalization. On the other hand, we believe that agreeing highly with the European Commission and I believe with the vast majority, or maybe all of the member states, that this twin transition should be the backbone of economic recovery. And as our Prime Minister has several times referred to, although we have our disputes in certain fields, these are the very policy areas where we are the closest possible allies of the EU institution. Another important element that we have also emphasized during the drafting of the 2019-2024 strategic agenda, and we are very happy that it is being mentioned as a key objective of the whole of the European Union, is safeguarding the achievements of the Union so far. Because, of course, while pursuing a stronger or deeper integration in some policy fields where there is a true consensus or a promise of consensus among member states, we must, of course, not let these very tangible and decades-long old achievements of the EU slip, such as the single market without obstacles, or the true and full validation of the four fundamental freedoms, and so on. Another important element which refers to a certain policy field, but it's also stemming from the above mentioned basic guiding principles of Hungarian EU policy, is to open our door as wide as possible for the accession of further members, especially for the candidate countries in the Western Balkans. If you also allow me to refer our government position regarding that, is that in the previous institutional cycle has been closed with the EU having less member states than at the beginning. So in the current cycle, the aim should be the opposite, to have more members of the EU than we had in 2019, which is an ambitious goal, but truly we believe that the stability and prosperity of the Western Balkans will contribute to the stability and the prosperity of the whole of Europe. And looking at the clock, I believe I am approaching the end of of my allocated time. So if you allow me just three very quick sentences on how we see the way forward and what we mean on the notion of a strong Europe of strong member states, as it has been drafted in several Hungarian government positions, but as well in V4, Visegrad Joint Declaration. It's basically that, and as you, Ambassador, have referred to the notion of multi-speed Europe, or a differentiated integration. Of course, any development that would result in a fracture among member states and in Europe is something that must be very carefully avoided. So we reject any distinction between old and new member states, is something that we don't like to hear after having been members for almost 17 years now. But of course, one of the main threats is the core and periphery dichotomy, which we believe that the EU integration should not fall into. And of course, in a way, the EU integration is already differentiated when it comes to the Eurozone or the Schengen area. But it's important to see that one of the key examples for such an integration model would be the instrument of enhanced cooperation, which one of the key attributes of that is that it is voluntary, and whenever the necessary number of member states feel like they should deepen integration and move forward among themselves in a certain policy field, they are free to do so. And however, of course, it's there is a difference between a two-speed, a core periphery Europe, and a multi-speed or a multipolar Europe. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, but please correct me if I'm wrong, there is 5 enhanced cooperations in action, out of which Hungary participates in 3 and does not participate in 2. And it's an easily conceivable situation then when at those policy fields where there is no consensus among member states, those who do not wish to move forward will not be forced to do so, but a system, a multi-layer system of enhanced cooperations may emerge, and instead of 5, there may come a time when there will be 20, out of which Hungary will participate in 14 and be leaving out in 6. And we believe that whenever these national efforts, if you allow me to come back to my starting point, and the national models are not hindered, but strengthened, amplified by EU integration, as we can see several good examples also in the post-2004 member states, but especially in the among the founding member states. If the EU can truly work in such a manner in pretty much all necessary or basic issues, then it will truly become competitive and can to the best perform in those policy fields that should be the primary focus also during the conference on the future of EU, and that contribute to competitiveness and growth and to the best well-being of our citizens. I'm sorry if I used more time than I should have. I will try to be as short as possible during the answers to the questions, as I can provide you the necessary time.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. Well, I think before that, in the second round, we also will be able to focus on some of the issues, as I said, which would fill in a bit the gaps in your excellent presentation, where you focused on the broader picture, which of course is very welcome. Madam Minister, may I ask you, and of course, I followed what you said on Europe on many instances, and I would therefore just like to single out maybe two remarks, which I think put the Austrian position in preparation of the conference on the future of Europe on a very high profile course. You made it one of your ambitions to bring Europe closer to the citizens. And I think you have been working hard in doing that, touring Austria and making a case for making Europe also an issue which is of interest to citizens and where they feel that Europe matters for them. And another instance, which I think is already quite some time ago, I found noteworthy, if you were in favor of discussing this conference and what we want to achieve in it without any taboos. And you mentioned, I think, at one case also the possibility of changing the treaties if necessary. So may I ask you maybe to provide the Austrian outlook, and of course, if you would like already now to react to State Secretary Höckers, you're more than welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur Schweisgut. Bonjour, tous mesdames et messieurs. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de participer à cette discussion. Et vous avez déjà mettre que j'ai vécu à Strasbourg pendant 2 années, mais maintenant je travaille en anglais normalement. Pardon, chers membres du Parlement, Monsieur Guetta, pour mon français, on a français, mais j'aime bien parler français, mais c'est anglais, c'est mieux. Cher secrétaire d'État, Mr. Höckers, c'est un plaisir aussi de se recevoir dans cette setting. Now I will change to English, and first of all, I would like to mention that I really highly appreciate the good cooperation between France and Austria, especially in the framework of the Austro-French Centre for Rapprochement. It's a good opportunity to exchange views, and as you already mentioned, dear Ambassador, I think we should focus at the moment on the future of Europe. Of course, everyone is busy in fighting COVID-19, tackling the crisis. We have a lot to do still in fixing the problem. Even if we have vaccines now, there is a really big thing to get enough doses for all the citizens of Europe. But me, I'm a minister for Europe, and I think it's our responsibility to think of the future, to draw the lessons out of this crisis, to make and build up a more resilient European Union. A Europe, and thanks for mentioning that also, which is closer by the people, with the people, where the people, the citizens, not only of Austria, but of the whole of Europe, can feel that their opinion matters, their fears, their visions for Europe. And I remember quite well, it is 25 years ago when I was 14, Austria became a part of the European Union, and there was such a good spirit. People were so happy. I was so happy. I wanted to study in other countries than Austria. By the way, I did it then in Austria because I became mother at the age of 20. But then I had the opportunity to go to work in the Council of Europe, also a very important part of Europe, and even bigger than and older than the European Union. And I think it's very important also to understand other countries, to understand other politicians from other countries. And I always say, don't judge someone in whose shoes you didn't walk. I learned that in the Council of Europe. I learned to look into details. Why is a politician from another country reacting in a way. And that's especially also why I think that the Conference on the Future of Europe is more than needed now during this pandemic, and I hope we can turn to more normality in the near future, because we need the citizens of Europe to tell us what they want, which Europe they want to see. And you mentioned also, dear Ambassador, that I was a member of the European Parliament. For that, it was only for half a year, for 6 months. Then I was taken back to Austria, and I'm really, I appreciate being a minister now for European affairs, but it made something with me. When I was sitting in the parliament, when we were talking about, for example, the moment when PEC, so President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was talking about the man on the moon moment with the green transition, the digital transition. All this was before the pandemic started. But now it's clear that we do need all these changes more than ever. And it's very actual, because I had a press conference today with the president of the Gemeindebund. It's the president, so to say, from all the mayors of the 2095 villages of Austria. And we were presenting this. And this is something which should help people who are engaging at the village level in politics to explain what the European Union is doing, to ask for the wishes of the people, to ask for their fears and their concerns in regard of the European Union. Yeah, and it's clear that we do have a lot of challenges still ahead of us, but now we have to be ambitious. And you mentioned it already. I always advocated for a quick start of the Conference on the Future of Europe. It's more than a half a year ago that it should have started. It didn't start, but now it is. I think it's quite close to have the official start. And I started the Conference on the Future of Europe in Austria already in June, and I am amazed what people know about the European Union, how engaged they are, and how happy they are if you are talking with them about the European Union and their wishes and their visions. And that's what we need. And I feel somehow responsible as a Minister for European Affairs in Austria also to create a positive vision, a positive atmosphere towards the European Union, because we only can build up a more resilient, more stronger Europe with the people living here, with their visions, and we should not exclude anyone. And that's my second point I would like to mention. Also, with regard to what my colleague from Hungary said, I think it's now the time to create solutions. It's now the time to work for the citizens of Europe. It's not the time of exclusion. I think we should really care for understanding each other, for working, having big solutions, from migration to climate change to digitalization. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And that's why I was always, and my Hungarian friends are knowing that very well, I'm in a close contact with Judith Varga also. I was always advocating also for this close interaction, and I stand to that also when we are looking back the last days and what we have to see on developments also in some of the parties. So I would like to be very clear on that. My wish is to engage even more stronger than before, having good and big solutions. That should be our task.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Mr. Guetta, if I may ask you, you are speaking, of course, as a member of the European Parliament, not as a member of the French government, but I'm sure you will be able to tell us something about the French position and also about your own views, which you also have put forward in a number of publications and books. But after all, I think many of us still remember the great speech made by President Macron at the Sorbonne in 2017, where he laid out a number of visions for Europe, I think, which obviously he's still putting forward in different contexts and which are part of the public debate.
Je vais vous dire, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, que ma tâche, en vérité, est très facile, parce que la vision que la France se fait de l'unité européenne n'a jamais varié depuis le traité de Rome jusqu'à maintenant, du général de Gaulle jusqu'au président Macron. Cette vision se résume en une phrase. la France souhaite que l'Union européenne s'affirme, devienne et s'affirme en acteur politique de la scène internationale. Pendant de longues décennies, beaucoup de nos partenaires des communautés, puis de l'Union, pas tous, mais beaucoup d'entre eux, ont considéré que cette position de la France découlait de l'anti-américanisme que l'on prête trop souvent et à tort à la France. Non, ce n'était pas cela. Et ce n'est certainement pas cela aujourd'hui. Pourquoi est-ce que nous souhaitons que l'Union européenne, nous souhaitons en France, que l'Union européenne devienne un acteur de la scène internationale? Eh bien, tout simplement parce que nous avons toujours eu le sentiment, et aujourd'hui ce sentiment s'avère, que les États-Unis ne se chargeraient pas éternellement de la défense du vieux continent et que nous aurions à prendre en main notre défense et donc notre politique étrangère. Quand je suis arrivé il y a 1 an et demi au Parlement, j'ai été stupéfait, heureusement surpris, de constater que l'idée d'une défense commune n'était plus tabou, pas du tout au Parlement européen, et que l'autre grande idée française, cette fois-ci dans le domaine économique, celle des politiques industrielles communes, n'était plus un tabou non plus. Et c'était avant la pandémie. Et c'était 6 mois avant la pandémie. Qu'est-ce qui a provoqué cette évolution? 2 choses. Le Brexit, largement, mais essentiellement, M. Trump. M. Trump, en nous disant très clairement, pendant sa campagne, la première, celle qu'il avait gagnée, que les États-Unis ne se porteraient pas obligatoirement à la défense de l'Union européenne, de pays de l'Union européenne, s'ils étaient attaqués, nous a envoyé un signal clair. Et quelques mois après, j'entendais, y compris à Varsovie, y compris dans la majorité actuelle qui gouverne la Pologne, que oui, il fallait commencer à penser à cette idée.
Monsieur Guetta, est-ce que je pourrais vous interrompre 1 seconde?
Je vous en prie.
J'ai plusieurs questions de notre audience parce qu'on a annoncé cet événement en anglais.
Vous ne m'avez pas dit?
S'il vous est possible de parler en anglais, ça fait facile.
Okay. So I will try. I didn't prepare that in my head in English, but okay, I will try to shift to English. And thanks, I would say thanks to Mr. Trump. The taboo on the common European defense is now completely over, including in Warsaw. And in Warsaw, I have many friends there because I was a correspondent during Solidarity times and so on. And so the people in charge in Warsaw keep telling me, but then of course we will need a European defense, but please don't tell that, because if the Americans hear that, they will leave Europe even faster than they wish, or they intend to. And so I would say that basically the main ideas of France about the future of Europe are now, I would say, mainstream ideas, common ideas in the European Union. Telling that, I'm not naive at all, just the opposite. I'm well aware of the fact that since we will start to discuss concretely about common defense, about European industrial policy, the fight will be enormous in the European Union, Because, okay, maybe for a common defense, but what kind of common defense? Okay, maybe for industrial policy, common industrial policy, but in which area? Where will we build the factories? In Austria or in Spain? In Portugal or in France? In Denmark or in Finland? And so on and so on. So there is a turn now, a deep one, but this turn will create real tensions in the European Union. But I'm glad of that, because we need tensions, because we need real discussions about real problems and real necessity. A second point, and it will be the last one. What should we do to affirm the European Union as a political actor of the international stage? I don't know. I don't know. And I would say that nobody does for the coming years, even in Paris, and probably even at the, don't tell him that, but probably even at the Élysée Palace. Because we got to be pragmatic about it, completely pragmatic. My personal wish, I said personal, my personal wish, my dream is that the European Union could become in 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know, the United States of Europe. I think so, but I am certainly in the minority in Europe and certainly in the minority in my own country. But I do agree with the majority of French people about the necessity to politically affirm the European Union. So I guess we will start by common industrial project and by the first step of the defense, and we will see. But now, in any case, we are obliged to go further on this way for three reasons. First, we are not sure anymore of the American protection. That's clear. There is a shift to Asia, there is a shift to China, and it won't change. Second, we have a problem, not an eternal one, but right now we have a problem on our eastern borders with Russia. And third, we have a problem, obviously, on the other rim of Mediterranean. I mean, the Arabic country or the Muslim countries. And so we have to find first a common diplomacy and second, and altogether, a common defense. And when we will get a common market, a common currency, a common defense, and a common industrial policy, what will it be? A federation? A confederation? Something completely new? I don't know, but probably something completely new. But I don't know yet, and nobody does, what kind of something completely new. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we had three very interesting presentations on what to focus on when we talk about the future of Europe. From a hands-on, let's get things done, work on results, let's not exclude people, to a vision which was not specifically called a federalist one, but which one could interpret as the Monnet method leading finally to a federalism by default. Now, in the second round, unfortunately, we only have about 15 minutes left, but I would still focus on some of the issues, I think, which we need to relate to the broader picture. And I would think those are, some of them are the following. Even if Mr. State Secretary, you mentioned very clearly that it was never the intention of the founding members and the founders to have the European Union as a sort of a corset limiting or restraining member states in their national aspirations. There are some things in the treaty, of course, which are very clear. Some of them are enshrined in Article 2, which are the fundamental values. We talk about human rights, the term of solidarity, and I think, and the rule of law, of course. And the way they have been interpreted, I think more recently, show that there are differing views on what that means and what kind of obligations that puts on member states. And I already mentioned at the beginning that obviously people focused on the fact that the Fidesz members of the European Parliament have now left their political family due to a feud which we are all familiar with. And of course, every once and then citizens wake up to the fact that in the view of many members or the majority, Hungary is not living up to its obligations when it comes to the rule of law, and that Hungary does not share the values of a liberal democracy, as most members would believe to be sort of the founding principles of becoming a member of the European Union. How would you respond to that? Or could you also offer a bit the background for that? And I would really have to ask you to be short to give the Minister and also Mr. Getter the possibility also to react and give us their views on that.
So it should be 3 minutes each.
Sure.
No, seriously, because I'm sorry, but I will have to leave you at 4 o'clock precisely.
Then I will be as short as possible. Well, first of all, Mr. Ambassador, you have referred to the Article 2 and the common values of the EU, which of course we fully share, and I believe that our commitment towards European values and those of freedom and human rights are not into question, because those are not the subject of the cited questionings or procedures, including, of course, the Article 7 procedure, the ongoing procedure against Hungary, or is not in the background of the party issues that you have referred to. However, if you let me summarize in such a way, we believe that these values are common European values because they are rooted in our common historical heritage, and that is being the foundations of freedom, independence, and of course Judeo-Christian heritage that must be safeguarded to the fullest extent. And also when it comes to rule of law, these values that are common and are the backbone of every European society must be safeguarded, but the primary addresses of that obligation in our view are the national constitutional institutions. Again, to be very brief, I have referred to national models. There are, of course, national models also when it comes to the national legal structures that have evolved organically through decades and centuries throughout the EU, that have their own conceptual framework and their own criteria, procedure, and they reflect just as it does the system of social policy or taxation or whatever field you name, the historic roots and identity of the specific nation in question. And this European values being common, but being safeguarded in national constitutional institutions, as well as being rooted in the freedom and independence stemming of the common Judeo-Christian heritage, which is, I would like to emphasize, not an ideological or a party political viewpoint. I believe this is a simple matter of fact, that national models, when I refer to the fact that they are the best suited to the peculiar economic and societal situation in in each member state. One may have the idea that these circumstances may and will, of course, converge and be, to use this word, leveled in a way, but the historical roots, the traditions, and the specific characteristic of the great nations that build up the whole European building will not, and of course must not, be harmonized in that way. And I will not repeat the quotation of Robert Schuman about the aim of the whole project. But it would be a cheap excuse to say that with regard to the party issues, I don't have the authority to comment. But of course, with regard to the viewpoint of the Fidesz party, the root of the problem is once again the same, that these core issues have been adhered to by the party, whereas of course the international and the specific national political landscapes in many of the member states have changed and moved the center of gravity within EPP to a different position. And this caused tensions, which I will not elaborate on for the lack of time, but should it emerge among the questions, I'm ready to address it.
Dear Ambassador, I would like to interfere, very precise and very clear, because as a former criminal judge, as an expert in human rights, as a minister for not only European affairs, but also constitutional affairs, I would like to be very clear on that. Rule of law, democracy and human rights, these are our core values. And dear Secretary, I would like to be also very clear in your direction when you're talking about national responsibilities. Yeah, of course, it's a national responsibility to safeguard these rules, but it's more than that. It's also a European responsibility to guide these principles. And it's the root where all our cooperation is founded upon. And we do face so many challenges in the future, and I only want to name one: the digital transformation and the downside of digitalization regarding hatred in the internet. We have to do a lot, and the common ground is to safeguard together on the European level also these principles, and beyond Article 7, there we can discuss about that, but it would need another hour at least. But we have also, for example, the rule of law mechanism, something like a measure to measure the rule of law, the temperature all over Europe, and that's something we really need. And therefore, I'm ending here, and maybe we can talk about that in the next session.
Well, thank you.
If you allow me just a blue card response once we have the European Parliament experience. And then I let MEP Guetta speak. I'm sorry. Although from the stance and from the tone of voice, one may hear that your intervention was in contradiction with mine. But I believe that we say the same thing, that the rule of law are the core principle of every member state and the EU. And there's no debate to that. However, at the EU level, when it comes to examining and safeguarding rule of law, and here I would like to refer to the mechanisms that you have briefly mentioned, apart from Article 7, which is a mechanism clearly stipulated in the treaties. Other mechanisms cannot operate in a way that itself infringe the very principle of rule of law. And as you said, Madam Minister, we would need at least an hour for each such mechanism to discuss. But when it comes to the Commission rule of law cycle, the rule of law report, or the conditionality or such issues, there are very, very serious, not only legal per se on a narrowly understood professional level, but serious rule of law concerns when it comes to those mechanisms.
Thank you, Mr. State Secretary, for repeating that. Mr. Guetta, you have a few words basically to react to that also. I'm sorry for the time constraint.
Well, to make it clear, I am very critical, obviously, of the disrespect in Budapest of the rule of law. I am as critical as the huge majority of the European Parliament is, but let's forget it. Let's focus on another point. The main point to understand the so-called illiberalism in Budapest is the beginning of the 90s and the shock therapy in Budapest. The transition to market economy was very difficult, painful for a lot of people, and it was less painful actually in Budapest than it was in Warsaw and in Moscow. But nevertheless, it was so painful that there is a resentment in Warsaw, in Budapest, in Moscow, but in Budapest certainly, against liberalism, because liberalism is understood in the former communist countries as Thatcherism, or as a tough Thatcherism, and social difficulties, and the rise of poverty. And so Mr. Orban understood this resentment and used this real and understandable resentment to get elected and to be very popular by his critiques of liberalism. And the problem is that liberalism now, in his mind, in his mouth, and in his policy, means civil liberties, means freedom, means rule of law. And when he says now that he's not liberal but illiberal, he doesn't mean that he is critical of the shock therapy, but he means, and that's very unfortunate, that he's very critical of civil liberties and enlightenment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that State Secretary would also like to respond to that, but I'm afraid we are out of time. I would like to thank all of you. Unfortunately, we would need some time to go on and also sort out some of the differences, I think, which has emerged. I would like to thank you, State Secretary, for giving us a broad view of the situation in Hungary. Madam Minister, I'm particularly thankful to you for being so clear and to the point, which I think was necessary at some point to make clear where we differ, where obviously the majority of member states have different views on some of the areas of main divergences, including the rule of law. And Mr. Guetta, you obviously joined in with this criticism, but you brought in a broader perspective, focusing a bit on the background of what some people call urbanism or developments in Hungary, which obviously provide a very special case study. But this is something I think to be continued. I take away from that obviously, despite all the divergences and the differences of views, there is a common will to build the future of Europe and also to work constructively in the conference on the future of Europe. And Mr. State Secretary, in your opening statements, you also focused on those issues where Hungary obviously will be a partner, from the green economy to digitalization, defense of the internal market. And I guess you didn't mention that, but when it comes to a stronger European defense and a stronger role on the global stage, I don't think that Hungary would object to that. Thank you very much for this. Unfortunately, time was not enough to take questions from the audience, but maybe we have another chance. Mr. State Secretary, I think you wanted to have a final word, or no? That's it. Thank you.